Greetings to all. Are you in despair or are you in hope? Sometimes I wonder which I'm in too. I don't want to be political, so I'll simply say we know we have a war which some may see as having no real purpose. And we know we have a war which certainly some may see as having no obvious end point. And yet life continues to challenge us. I want to share a few things with you. Mostly video work, so please be patient. The first is a thought about power, the second about conscience, and the last about courage. What we do is we begin to reflect always on what's happening to us. Fuel prices, prices at the supermarket. Will things like fuel remain available? And yet, when we think about it, what about the 500 million people in the Middle East who are living with all of this around them, no matter what side they're on? I sometimes wonder why the Middle East. It really comes from a viewpoint set in the glory days of the United Kingdom. If you stand in Britain and look east, obviously it is the Middle East. Although for those of us in other parts of the world, it may not be. However, it's there and it's going through trauma and we're affected by it as much as anyone else. And so on the one hand, we have those who threaten on both sides to make life hell, and in fact are currently doing so. And I reflect on whether that is really power. Is it? There's a small piece from Schindler's List about what power really is.
They fear us because we have the power to kill arbitrarily. A man commits a crime, he should know better. We have him killed and we feel pretty good about it. Or we kill him ourselves and we feel even better. It's not power, though. Power is when we have every justification to kill, and we don't.
Power is when we have every justification to kill, and we don't. Have we exhausted all possibilities for dialogue? I was reminded this morning of a piece in Man's Search for Meaning about the prisoners who are released from the concentration camp. And Frankl says, only slowly could these people be guided back to the commonplace truth that no one has the right to do wrong, not even if wrong has been done to them. So where is the conscience of our leaders on all sides? It still keeps ticking, is Frankl's teaching.
I said to him, Dr. Frankl, I've always been puzzled. I just don't understand. He had been talking a little bit about the war and that kind of stuff. I don't understand how in the world people could do what they do in a wartime. We kill one another and blah, 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 blah. And I said, it just seems to me, my answer all these years have been, it seems to me that man has the capacity to anesthetize his conscience, and therefore that's why he does these weird things. He's anesthetized his conscience. And I believe that until I talked with your grandfather, and he said, oh, no, he said, I would never teach that. You cannot anesthetize your conscience. What you can do, and what man is capable of, and what he does do is he anesthetizes himself against the voice of his conscience, but that conscience is always cooking.
That conscience is always cooking. We're all broken, and our conscience is there. And I wonder what it says to us in these circumstances. I'm going to share the story of Chino Sugihara in Lithuania, in 1940. You may never have heard of the man. In fact, he may never have been heard of had his files not been discovered in Tokyo after the war, some of the few files that had not been destroyed by the bombing. As the consul in Latvia, he was asked to issue transit visas for many Jewish refugees. Transit visas meant you're allowed to transit through Russia into Japan, provided you keep going. And they had found out that if they went to Curacao, which is on the top of South America, they did not need a visa to get in. They just needed visas to get there. And so they approached him, and he struggled with what to do.
During the summer of 1940, Sugihara was preparing to close his consulate and report to the Japanese embassy in Berlin for reassignment. He believed his work in Kaunas was over until the morning of July 27th.
I opened my bedroom window in the morning, and there they were, about 200 of them, I guess, surrounding the house. We had no idea who they were.
An unruly crowd of Jewish refugees with Curacao visas was outside begging to see the Japanese consul.
There were children, women, and young men. They were all hanging onto the fence. The young men were trying to climb over the fence, but the security of the consulate was pushing them back.
Sugihara asked the crowd to send in 5 representatives to state their case. Inside, the men requested transit visas and told Sugihara he was their last hope. Zorach Warhaftig led the group. Samuel Groutens was his secretary.
We discussed the metals with him, and he had his, at first, his doubts whether he can do it, because he would have to get the permission of his government.
Sugihara cabled back to the foreign ministry in Tokyo. In his letter, he described the mounting problems in Kaunas and asked permission to issue the visas. But the request was denied. The ministry insisted that visas could only be issued if Sugihara followed strict guidelines. The refugees must have a valid end visa, and they must have enough money to cover their travel expenses. Clearly, issuing visas for them would be a flagrant violation of the rules. Over the next few days, Sugihara cabled back several times with visa requests. But the approval never came. Meanwhile, the crowds continued to build. Sugihara was faced with an agonizing decision. To disobey his government would surely bring punishment and disgrace. Also, assisting Jews in these anti-Semitic times could lead to grave consequences. To the Soviets, now in control of Lithuania, emigrants were considered traitors, and aiding their passage was a capital offense. Despite the possible risk to himself and his family, Sugihara was persuaded by the desperate stories of the refugees.
Those people told me the kind of horror they would have to face if they didn't get away from the Nazis, and I believed them. There was no place else for them to go. They trusted me. If I had waited any longer, even if permission came, it might have been too late.
For the next 4 weeks, Sugihara worked tirelessly to fulfill their requests, issuing hundreds of transit visas a day. Many had to be handwritten in the complex characters of Japanese. When he checked the refugees' paperwork, he found that many were missing essential documents.
I'd say more than half of them had no passport. Under the conditions they had to deal with when they left their homeland, it seemed understandable. So we accepted anything, even blank sheets of paper with Curacao, no visa required, handwritten as a destination.
Some refugees, like Susan Blumen and her husband, had no Curacao visas at all, but still received a transit visa from Sugihara.
My husband went to Tunis, Sugihara, asking for a visa, but we didn't have any other visa on it, really. But somehow Sugihara gave us the visa. He was just doing from the bottom of his heart. It was wonderful.
Working 16 hours a day, Sugihara became obsessed with his mission. He even requested an extension on his stay in Kaunas, so he could continue his life-saving work. Moses Zupnik came to Sugihara with his Curacao visas in hand, requesting 300 transit visas for the Mir Yeshiva.
I said to him, I'm a representative of the Mir Yeshiva. We want to go to Curacao. We just want to go through Japan.
Zupnik nervously awaited the response. To his surprise, Sugihara agreed to write all the visas.
I still remember when he looked at me, when he said to me, all right, I give you the visas. I don't forget those things because it's still all alive in me. He saw people suffering and he thought maybe he could help, and he helped.
Zupnik returned several days later to pick up the visas, but he found Sugihara's assistant, Wolfgang Gutsche, in a panic over the ever-growing volume of requests.
So I came in the morning, I see Wolfgang Gutsche is all excited and tells the consul, how could I handle 1,000 visas? The people are standing outside in line. How could I all handle it?
But finally, the Russians insisted that the Japanese consulate close. Sugihara and his family began packing their belongings, while Moses Zupnik prepared for his journey to Japan.
When we got to the hotel, the Jewish people came looking for us there. So he wrote some more visas in the hotel. The next day, when we got to the train station, they were there too. So he wrote more visas on the platform until the train left. Once we were on board, they were hanging on the windows, and he wrote some more. When the train started moving, he couldn't write anymore. Everyone was waving their hands. One of them called out, "Thank you, Mr. Sugihara. We will come to see you again." And he came running after the train. I couldn't stop crying. When I think about it, even now, I can't help crying.
And to finish off the story, many of them made it to Japan, but that's as far as they were able to go. They stopped in Kobe due to the war, and eventually were transferred to Shanghai because the Japanese gave in to Nazi questions to say, why are you harboring these Jews? But many survived. It was a story of bravery. So we're all challenged to be courageous. Could I do that? Could I risk my career and in fact my life? I don't know. I haven't been there. But we hope our leaders can. We hope there is more to be gained by looking at possibilities than there is by simply destruction and causing hell. Thank you for listening.